somebody land, in mana earlier Andhra Pradesh, plane la దిగుతారు, గాంధీ భవన్ పోతారు, కౌంటర్ల పైసలు పడేసి టికెట్ కొనుక్కొని వాడు కాన్స్టిట్యున్సీకి పోతాడు. దట్ ఫెలో డజంట్ ఈవెన్ నో వేర్ దట్ కాన్స్టిట్యున్సీ ఈస్. Other political parties are equally bad, and we are all collectively suffering. So, not to deviate, coming to the topic, is media becoming a tool to subvert democracy? Yes. I am a witness to the decline of the media in India. For the last 40 years, I have been a witness because I have been an activist accidentally, taking up so many issues. And believe me, friends, the media which I knew earlier, they were more activists than me. In fact, they promoted my activism. They coined the word citizens against pollution. They were the people who were always interviewing and highlighting the issues. They were promoting activists to a big, even today, a section of the media is doing that job. But unfortunately, as we go into as we are a witness, subsequently we notice the rise of the corporates. And with this, they started purchasing the shares of the TV channels. And today, in India, it is the corporates who control the media. The corporates control the political bosses. I am very sorry to say that in India, like rest of the world, political parties have reduced themselves to being the dogs of the corporates. Very serious. We have to do something. We have the good work done by Jayapal Reddy Garu. It's not a joke, from Kalvakurti, Madgul to Hyderabad his journey has been fantastic. To Delhi, he was one politician who was always looked upon for ideas. When he spoke or whenever he used to speak, India would listen, because every word, it would convey a great message. There are many in this, particularly Pawan, who is also a product of Jayapal Reddy Garu. We are all a witness to that wonderful communication. And it's not just the speech. When Madam Gandhi imposed emergency, imagine the guts of the person who resigned. Just resignation letter varation. That speaks about the personality, that kind of people we require today. He refused to blindly accept the pressure of the corporates when it comes to Krishna Godavari KG gas basin. He stood by the people, because the natural resources should not fall into the hands of the corporates. It is the wealth of the people. How can anybody, be part and parcel, helping the corporates? But unfortunately, friends, after 1991, we see the decline at the global level. Fall of Soviet Russia has come down very heavily, and the rise of the LPGs, and it had its impact on India. It had, and today you can see political decline completely. I am very sorry to say that the mainstream media in most parts of this country, they are controlled by political parties, and political parties through what a process known as investment they purchase the shares, and that is the end of the media. I'll give you, because I am not the main speaker, before I request other distinguished speakers, we have just introduction. We have Pawan Mamidi. Professor Pawan is Director for Center for Social and Behavior Change, Ashoka University. I know him very well. Then we have Professor Donti Narasimhareddy Garu, who is very well known in the entire country and even abroad when it comes to public policy. I heard Dr. Kota Nilima the other day. Brilliant. She is Director, Center for Perception Studies, New Delhi, and an activist to the core. And Dilip Reddy Garu, because he already is very, very extremely well known, being a former editor of Sakshi paper and TV, and danikana minchi, he was former commissioner of to implement RTI, and in fact is the only commissioner known in among the Telugu people, because ఆయన ఒక్కడే కదా తిరిగింది. ప్రజలు గుర్తుపట్టే ఆర్టీఐ అనగానే దిలీప్ రెడ్డి గారు, తర్వాత ఇప్పుడు మా ఫ్రెండ్ మన మాడబూ శ్రీధర్. బిలీవ్ మీ ఫ్రెండ్స్, పొజిషన్స్ రాగానే కాదు. ఏ పర్సన్ హ్యాస్ టు aspire for a position only with the intention of serving. Dilip Reddy has always stood by the people, and even today he is committed to that cause of spreading, recognizing the right of the people for information. Professor Sanjay Asthana, ఆయనతోటి లాస్ట్ 1-2 months నుంచి 1.5 months నుంచి రోజు మాట్లాడుతున్నా. Marvelous. He is an encyclopedia, and he is a Fulbright scholar from the University of Mid Tennessee State University. అంటే అమెరికాలో కూడా పబ్లిక్ యూనివర్సిటీస్కు పేద ప్రజల పిల్లలే పోతారు. అటువంటి అంత ఆ యూనివర్సిటీలో రాత్రింబగళ్ళు పనిచేసి వాళ్ళకు బెస్ట్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్ ఇవ్వాలనే ఇంటెన్షన్ తోటి మన హీరో ప్రొఫెసర్ సంజయ్ ఆస్థానా, ఆయన ఇక్కడికి వచ్చిండు 6 నెలలు ఒక ప్రాజెక్ట్ మీద స్టడీ రీసెర్చ్ కొరకు. ప్రతిరోజు ఏదో బస్తీకి పోతాడు. అంటే ఈ సోల్ ఈజ్ విత్ ద టాయిలింగ్ మాసెస్. He is trying to understand the rising aspirations of the teeming millions of people living in the slums of Hyderabad. చాలా వండర్ఫుల్ ఇట్ ఈస్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్. అందుకే నేను ఆయనను పికప్ చేసి వస్తా అని చెప్పిన. ఈ 45 minutes కూడా ఇట్ వాజ్ వండర్ఫుల్ ఎడ్యుకేషన్. సో ఫ్రెండ్స్, వన్ లాస్ట్ పాయింట్ ఐ వాంటెడ్ టు మెన్షన్. ఈ మధ్యన రూబిన్ బెనర్జీ విన్నాను. రూబిన్ ఆయన లీడింగ్ జర్నలిస్ట్ ఉన్నాడు ఇప్పుడు, హైదరాబాద్లో ఉండే. ఈ వర్క్డ్ ఇన్ న్యూస్ టైమ్, ఇండియన్ ఎక్స్ప్రెస్, తర్వాత మన భువనేశ్వర్లో ఇండియా టుడే హెడ్ ఉండే, తర్వాత హిందుస్థాన్ టైమ్స్ నేషనల్ ఎడిటర్ ఉండే, తర్వాత అవుట్లుక్. అంత వన్ ఆఫ్ ద మోస్ట్ రెస్పెక్టెడ్, ఎక్సలెంట్ హ్యూమన్ బీయింగ్, కమిటెడ్ టు వాల్యూస్. కోవిడ్ టైంలో మీకు యాదకుంది కదా, ఒక phase 2 అప్పుడు సెకండ్ స్టేజ్లో చాలామంది చనిపోయారు. మనందరికీ తెలిసిన వాళ్ళు, దగ్గర వాళ్ళు, బంధువులు, నేబర్సు, లొకాలిటీ వాళ్ళు, మన ఊరోళ్ళు, ఎవరో తెలిసిన వాళ్ళు చాలామంది పోయాను. మనందరం ఏం చేసినాం? అరే తిట్టుకుంటూ కూస్తున్నాం. ఏం చేస్తుంది గవర్నమెంట్, స్టేట్ గవర్నమెంట్ ఏం చేస్తుంది, సెంట్రల్ గవర్నమెంట్ ఏం చేస్తుంది, థింగ్స్ ఆర్ నాట్ హ్యాపెనింగ్, వ్యాక్సిన్ వాట్ ద హెల్ ఈజ్ హ్యాపెనింగ్ అని తిట్టుకున్నామా లేదా? అందరం తిట్టినాం. కాకపోతే ఇక మన ఇంట్లో అప్పుడు లాక్డౌన్ పీరియడ్ కనుక ఎవరింట్లో వాళ్ళు కూర్చొని కనపడ్డానుకో ఫోన్ చేసో మాట్లాడుతూ తిట్టినాం. కానీ రూబిన్ ఏం చేసిండు, ఇదే మనందరం అనుకునేది. ఆయన అవుట్లుక్ కవర్ పేజ్లో గవర్నమెంట్ మిస్సింగ్ అని పెట్టాడు. 1000 మంది చనిపోతుంటే గవర్నమెంట్ కనపడకపోతే ఏమంటాడు? హీ డిడ్ హిస్ జాబ్, హీ రిఫ్లెక్టెడ్ అవర్ ఫీలింగ్స్. గవర్నమెంట్ మిస్సింగ్ అని పెడితే 24 hours లోపల ఆయన జాబ్ పోయాను. ఫార్ వాయిసింగ్ ద కన్సర్న్స్ ఆఫ్ ద పీపుల్. అప్పుడు ఆయన, బికాజ్ ఈజ్ ఎ ఫైటర్, ఎడిటర్ మిస్సింగ్ అనే ఒక బుక్ రాశాను. దట్ ఈస్ క్రియేటింగ్ ఇంటలెక్చువల్ వేవ్స్ ఇన్ ద కంట్రీ. Hats off to Rubin. We'll have his book release very soon, and with these few words we have to once again we need to come together to revive the spirit of democracy. మీరందరూ దయచేసి జైపాల్ రెడ్డి గారు రాసిన బుక్కు ఏది 10 ఐడియాలజీస్ మీరు చదవాలి. మాకేం చేసేది ఉంది, మేము బిజినెస్లో ఉన్నాం, రియల్ ఎస్టేట్లో ఉన్నాం, అది కాదు ఇష్యూ. ఎవ్రీబడి హ్యాస్ టు రీడ్. వన్ పాయింట్ ఈజ్ డెమోక్రసీ గురించి ఒక్క మాట చెప్పాలి. దిస్ ఈజ్ వన్ గేమ్ వేర్ ఎవ్రీబడి ఈజ్ ఎ ప్లేయర్. ఇప్పుడు క్రికెట్ అంటే జస్ట్ అక్కడ 11 మంది, ఇక్కడ 11 మంది ఉంటారు, కానీ అట్లా కాదు కదా, స్పెక్టేటర్స్ ఉంటారు. కానీ డెమోక్రసీలో స్పెక్టేటర్ రోల్ ఉండదు. ఇటర్నల్ విజిలెన్స్ ఇస్ ద ప్రైజ్ వీ నీడ్ టు పే ఇన్ డెమోక్రసీ. అండ్ ఆల్ ఆఫ్ అస్ హ్యావ్ గాట్ టు బి విజిలెంట్. అంటే మొదలు మనకు సబ్జెక్ట్ తెలవాలే కదా. నేను పొలిటికల్ సైన్స్ 52 ఏళ్ళ నుంచి చెప్తూ వచ్చిన, రిటైర్ అయినాక కూడా దాదాపు అదే పని చేస్తున్నా. డెమోక్రసీ గురించి కొన్ని వేల లెక్చర్స్ ఇచ్చిండవచ్చు, కానీ బిలీవ్ మీ ఫ్రెండ్స్, జైపాల్ అన్న రాసిన బుక్ డెమోక్రసీ చాప్టర్, అంత మంచి చాప్టర్ నేను మళ్ళీ చూడలేదు. వాట్ ఏ వండర్ఫుల్, ఇట్ ట్రేసెస్ ద హిస్టరీ ఆఫ్ డెమోక్రసీ రైట్ ఫ్రమ్ ఏథెన్స్, వైశాలి నుంచి ఇప్పుడు లేటెస్ట్ వరకు. ఎన్నో అంత బ్యూటిఫుల్ డెపిక్షన్ ఈవెన్ వెస్టర్న్ పొలిటికల్ థింకర్స్ కూడా చేయలేదు. దిస్ హీ కుడ్ డూ బికాస్ హీ వాజ్ బోత్ గుడ్ ఇన్ ద థియరీ అండ్ ఆల్సో in practice. With these few words, I request Professor Narasimha Reddy garu to continue.
Without ado, I will request Dilip Reddy garu to speak, and then we'll go one by one after that.
Thank you, Narsana. Good morning, all of you. My association with Jayapal Reddy garu as a professional journalist, on many occasions I used to meet sir either in Hyderabad or in Delhi. But this is very auspicious day to remember him. And especially the topic has been given by Narsana. The media, is it becoming a tool in the hands of either into the hands of power or the corporates? Is it subserving its purpose? That is the question before us. But incidentally, amongst the panelists, I am the only fellow with a media background. For last 30-35 years I am in media. But no way less than me, Nilima garu and Narsana, is many a times they are making media pieces, means reporting the scenario situation prevailing in the state and country. As far as Jayapal Reddy garu is concerned, democracy is almost synonym for his political life. He was a true democrat, and he used to love being a political professional, the perception and thought of democracy. If we consider these 2-3 elements which we now incorporated in the title of today's symposium, the media, democracy and Jayapal Reddy garu, these three are a beautiful triangle with internally connected. Once he was telling with me, I shared with the professors many a times that he used to say that media itself is my constituency. I don't think any contemporary politician in this country claiming himself so associated with media and saying that media is my constituency, either in power or in opposition, whatever the political position, but he was the very media savvy and media persons. I was there in Delhi for 1 year in 2004 and 5 when I was heading political bureau for under the Delhi bureau for largest circulated Telugu Delhi Inadu. I used to go there. I used to sit with him for hours together. Lakshmaka is very much here. He used to get frequently repeated rounds of chai and snacks. He used to enjoy with spending journalists, and every year he used to organize one big lunch or dinner with journalists in Delhi. I participated 2 such programs there in Delhi. And the fashion, the love towards to democracy and democratic values. That's why democracy has to be strengthened with the supportive institutions like media. The sole purpose of media itself has to act as the bridging force between the people and the rulers. But even in Indian condition, Narsana was making big remarks against the media in India, and Professor Sab also, till recent he was not lost his hope on media, but in the recent times, at least for last 1 year, he is disgusted with media. Earlier he was having a lot of hope, but my humble request to you that we has to see the positive side of media also. In the last 100 years, if we see in India, the contribution of media for the betterment of society in different dimensions and the sphere of the life, its contribution was a lot. And at the same time, over a period of time, I can give an example here. When Irom Sharmila, after breaking her 18 years of silence against that special powers to the army forces, she organized one press conference. So before that day, there was a leak from their team that she is entering into the politics. By taking that, after a long gap of 18 years, she is opening mouth and speaking something. There was a big gathering of media people, and one fellow posed a question to Sharmila that, is it true you are coming into politics? Then simply she said yes. Then his immediate question was that politics are so dirty. Then her sharp reaction is that, as of our society. So either politics or media, we cannot see it isolated by bringing it out of the society. The decline in everywhere, that is everywhere, the degradation of values, decline in the professionalism, efficiency, and its commitment and conviction towards its targeted and aims of that particular institution in this country. Similarly, we have to see the media, but media over a period of time, if you see the media 150 years back when British rule was there, subserving the purpose of British colonial ruler, hiding many things and revealing very limited amount of information into the public domain was the practice of media of that time. But the historic moment, the independent struggle, the media did tremendous and an historic job, which is the role model for the entire world. That sort of contributions was made by media in this country. Most of the freedom fighters, either they are the advocates at bar, or most of them the prolific writers of that time. Even Mahatma Gandhi used to say that 2 things I can quote for my lifetime in achieving this independence helped me. I utilized optimum those 2. One is traveling a nook and corner of the country by using the railways. The second one is using the media to disseminate my thought process into the public domain for motivating them. These are the 2 he used to quote Mahatma. So like that, media, a tremendous job. But post-independence also in the early 60s and 70s up to in the middle of 80s, and just Professor was rightly mentioning that the LPG, liberalization, privatization and globalization almost ruined the role of media in this country because of the lumpen capital is coming into this media. I can't speak much today against the media because I am there for last 30 years. I am everything there, so that's why my voice may not be louder against the media, but I will try to focus the positive side in strengthening the democracy. Democracy, we all, without any barriers and without any conditions, we have to love like the democracy, because democracy is the way for the entire world today for a better society. I would like to quote again Jayapal Reddy Garu as far as the democracy is concerned. Professor Sir rightly mentioning that all we must go with that book of great Sinha. Yashwant Sinha made an observation that without giving the title of the author, if anybody gives this book to me, I was in the impression that this by a renowned professor of international standard, but I know that this is by Jayapal Reddy Garu. That is the greatness of that book. In that he says about the democracy, I will quote, despite repeated and continual setbacks in various parts of the world, democracy continues to have an undiminished appeal for people. Its popularity compels all sorts of rulers to promise electoral democracy. It's true that elections, when held, are often rigged and people are swayed diversionary ethnic slogans, but democracy as a political system is universally acknowledged. This is after centuries of evolution of process in the administration, ultimately which is largely accepted across the globe is the democracy. So that's why though we sometimes embarrassing situation we may face in this democracy because of numericals. Today all the political parties are after numbers. Today if you pick any newspaper today, either for the state politics or the central politics, they are like the generation today, the students marching after MARKS, Marx. Once it was after Marx, Karl Marx, but today the students going after the Marx. How many our child getting out of 198 or 99 or what that Marx? Today those numbers are becoming big figure in the minds of the political bosses today to how to develop our numbers, because unfortunately our democracy 49 is equal to 0, whereas 51 is equal to 100. That number game is there in the democracy. So 49 0, 51 is 100, and the difference is 2 equal to 100. That's why all the political bosses today of ruling political spectrum is doing mockery of democracy. In that area, the media, by disseminating information into the public domain, it has to educate and motivate the people for defeating this sort of political approaches of contemporary political scenario. That media has to do tremendous role. We should not lose hope at this juncture, because for the media its commission and omission, for its writing and not writing, for all these things, with the proprietary coming into the content management and disseminating information as they desired, and that interventions of proprietary. Earlier this was not there. When I came into the profession 35 years back, the scenario was totally different, but today the situation is totally different. For that, what is the remedy? We should not lose the hope. Again I will quote Jayapal Reddy Garu in his 10 Ideologies book. While concluding that book, he makes a beautiful observation. I again quote here, let hope trump over the despair. Hope should not be based on such an event as to the neglect negative assessments. Negativity can be countered by the nobility. Negativity can be countered by nobility. 500 years back, what Mahamantri Timmarusu did when Krishnadevaraya asked him to reduce this line without cutting it and simply drawing a bigger line beside. That sort of nobility should come, as the Rig Veda rightly says, let noble thoughts come to us from every side. All said and done, everything depends upon the thought. And elevating thoughts can potentially eliminate all threats to humanity by building a bridge access to the great asymmetry. That's exclusively a chapter by Jayapal Reddy Garu, that asymmetry between the tradition of agrarianism and the transformation of industrialization. In the similar lines, I unquote here, and in the similar lines how Jayapal Reddy Garu produced asymmetry between the agrarianism and industrialism. Here, the truth and the myth. That is a big widening gap here today, which has to be filled by the media by disseminating right information into the public domain with its true committed and conviction for the strengthening and healthy strengthening of democracy. Media has to do its role. The eminent speakers are here with their vast experience, can give proper inputs which can alter the media present day functioning and bringing that into the right track of media's role for the strengthening democracy. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, Dilip Reddy Garu. I think I'll like to clarify, this session is not for media bashing. మనం మీడియాని బ్లేమ్ చేయడానికి సెషన్ పెట్టలేదు. దిస్ ఈస్ మోర్ ఆఫ్ అనలైజింగ్ వాట్ ఈస్ హ్యాపెనింగ్, observing what is going to happen because of these current conditions. And in general, even earlier we organized a lot of meetings on democracy. So this is part of that, because our concern is how to strengthen democracy. And media is one of the important pillars in that. So this analysis, this discussion, I think all of them are going to basically give us insights on how we can strengthen the fourth pillar of democracy. It's not about blaming XYZ or something else. So as part of democratic strengthening process, I think we can take some of the ideas from Jayapal Reddy Garu, whatever he has written, whatever he has spoken, and what he has done in action. So I think that Professor Sanjay Asthana, he is going to deal with that. Of course, it's up to you, whatever. I'm just, he is a student of mass communications. We are different. Of course, Kota Nilima, she is also a practitioner, media practitioner. So they have some different insights. Professor Pawan and myself, I think we come from a different background. And at least me, I'm not a theorist on media, but I have a lot of observation, because in our work with sustainable issues, sustainability issues, equity and environmental ecological issues, I keep coming up with instances where media has become a tool which tries to counter whatever we are doing. So I am going to speak more on that. So right now I invite Professor Pawan to place his views on this.
Thank you, sir. Sir?
You can introduce yourself.
Yes, sir, yes. No, first of all, it's a very nervous job for me today, because I'm standing in front of my university. You have formal institutions and you have informal institutions. And, formally I attended Nizam College, sir, but informally I attended a bigger university, and that is the Jayapal Reddy University. And you are one of the professors in that university also. So, it's not just Jayapal Reddy Garu, but I have in front of me people with immense wisdom, and I have learnt at their feet. Mrs. Reddy Garu, she's been a great inspiration. She's been a teacher also, in terms of her resilience, in terms of her patience. Behind every free man
and behind every free speech is a hard-working woman, and we have to acknowledge what she has contributed to So free speech comes at a cost, and we will get to that point in a short duration. But it's my immense pleasure to stand in front of Professor Purushottam Reddy garu. He is my teacher, an inspiration, and I learnt under his tutelage. Yadav Reddy garu, Madanna, all these people have been my teachers. So it's a difficult job for me, and of course I'm also sharing the dais with really eminent people, Narasimha Reddy garu, Neelima garu. It's such an honor, and Sanjay, the fact that you're teaching in a public institution is wonderful. I really think that it is an important service that you're delivering. So it's truly an honor. And of course, Guruswami garu is not here. He's been another teacher of mine. So I want to talk about a couple of ideas, and what I want to do is filter them through the ideas of scholars that Jayapal Reddy garu knew about. These are discussions that we've had, and some of the names that you will hear today are people that he discussed quite extensively. And so I'm choosing only those names which he talked about with a great deal of enthusiasm, with a great deal of anxiety sometimes, and with tremendous clarity, of course, which he was known for. The first sort of thought that I would like to start with is media becoming a tool to subvert democracy? And I want to recast that question. I want to ask that question in a slightly different way. Because this question is an empirical question. Nobody has gone out and measured it as such. We have anecdotal evidence of our private experiences in society, which tells us that maybe perhaps media has indeed become a tool that subverts democracy. But a corollary question that we must ask is, can media become a tool to subvert democracy? And if indeed the answer to that question is yes, then what can we do about it? And that's the positive agenda, sir, that you're talking about. And a more core question that comes up related to this is, should we regulate free speech? And what is free speech? Free speech is the freedom that we enjoy to be able to say anything that comes to our mind or into our heart, right? So, I mean, mansle unta cheppe freedom undalane, that is free speech. It's a value. But is it a value that we preserve in an unadulterated manner, or are there any limits to free speech? Is a key question, because free speech has tremendous advantages. It promotes creativity. We can't have innovation without free speech. We can't have great poetry and great philosophy without free speech. But sometimes free speech also causes problems, and we will examine the other side of what free speech does as well. So in trying to answer that question, should we regulate free speech, let us first consider some of the great advantages of free speech and how, when free speech was compromised, it led to really tragic outcomes. The first example that I'm reminded of is what Jayapal Reddy garu introduced me to. It's the historical fact of how Giordano Bruno, who was a heretic in Italy, was burnt at the stake. He was nailed to a stake and burnt in Italy in 1600. Right, and there was a Roman Inquisition. He was known to be a person who spoke against the grain of society, and he was basically burnt. He was publicly burnt. Why? Because he spoke the truth, and the truth was he supported the Copernican concept of heliocentrism. Almost everybody in the world believed that the suns and the stars went around the earth, but Bruno was one of the first persons to say, actually, we should support Copernicus. It's the planets which go around the sun and not the other way around, and that was a matter of truth. And he was burnt for that. The second example, again a favorite example of Jayapal Reddy garu, is the example of Socrates. Everybody remembers, I remember seeing a book in his shelf in 14 Akbar Road. History of Western Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, and the cover of the book had Socrates drinking hemlock. Hemlock, a bowl of hemlock is a bowl of poison, because he was convicted to a death sentence by the people. So here is the very interesting question. The question here is that the democratic system of Athens those days killed truth. So it's not as if truth and democracy always go together. They have an uneasy relationship sometimes. So in trying to think that democracy and truth always accompany each other is also slightly misleading. They have a complicated relationship. And the people who voted for Socrates' death were the people of Athens. Why? Because the charge against him was that he had corrupted the minds of the youth, when he was actually speaking the truth, when he was actually speaking his heart and mind. And the third example that comes to my mind is that of Galileo, who also supported Copernican heliocentrism. He said that the earth actually goes around the sun and so forth, because he had invented the telescope, and empirically, observational empiricism was born because of him. He more or less gave the first piece of evidence to suggest that the earth actually goes around the sun. And the Ecclesia, the Medici authority, the church, the Roman Catholic Church was visibly upset with him. They said, you have to recant what you have said, you have to take back your words. And that's what Galileo had to do temporarily. He of course came up with publications subsequently holding his position, but during that particular period, the ecclesiastical authority and the Medici family prevailed and subverted truth. Right? So power and power that is derived from democracy can also go against truth in some sense. So we need to bear that in mind. But let us look at the benefits of free speech. The method of science would not be possible without free speech. If you cannot sit in a seminar room of a university and challenge the propositions of a researcher and say that this could be false, if you do not have the freedom to falsify existing hypotheses, then you are basically subverting the methodology of science. So science itself, the very process of science itself, has to necessarily depend on the freedom that individuals should be given to challenge existing dogma, and that's a very important thing. And this position, and this freedom to falsify the existing knowledge is called falsification, and this is a philosophy proposed by another great German philosopher, or rather Austrian philosopher, Karl Popper, who was again J.P. Garu's one of his favorite philosophers. In point of fact, one day he recounted a debate that he had with Manmohan Singh ji about an understanding of falsification. And I believe that J.P. Garu had a far more sophisticated understanding of falsification, the Popperian concept of falsification. So in order to be able to falsify the pre-existent, you need to have the freedom. You need to have the freedom to speak your mind and your heart based on your individual experience. That's another point that I would like to bring for your consideration, I humbly submit it for your consideration. The next idea that I would like to submit in front of you, that I would like you to think about, is again based on Popper. Popper wrote this wonderful book called Open Society and Its Enemies. He criticized Plato, he criticized Marx, and he promoted the idea of an open society where people could be free. But yet, Popper said this about free speech. He said the following: a society that shows unlimited tolerance, if you have unlimited tolerance in society towards people with intolerant ideas, you are being tolerant. But if you are tolerant of people with intolerance, those people will come back and compromise the freedom of the tolerant. Right? And this is a paradoxical result that comes forth. So free speech, in some sense, according to Popper, needs to be regulated. If you did not regulate it, then what happens is that freedom itself becomes the antithesis of the very noble end that it seeks to pursue. And that's a deep, and it's a very subtle and a deep point. But if Popper himself, who was a liberal, who promoted free society, said that we need to regulate free speech based on that. I think it merits some attention. Moving on, I would like to talk a little about the role of digital media. There are three broad paradigms. I think some of the deepest problems that we are facing in society are on account of the all-pervasiveness of digital media and the role, for instance, that it has played in almost subverting American democracy. Everybody now is a witness to the images of what happened on January 6th of 2021 when all those people, based on false information, marched to the Capitol in Washington, D.C. and nearly subverted the very foundation of democracy by trying to continue with Donald Trump. Right? This is the post-truth phenomena. What are the three paradigms of digital media? The first paradigm was one of where you had one person, this is the traditional media, and one person basically communicated with multiple people. As a child, I remember sitting and reading the Hindu or the Indian Express. It came from one source, it came to multiple people. The person in the chai shop also read that. If you were to go to Kerala, a lot of democratic discussion happens in the little panda bus where people sit and read the newspaper and smoke their cigarettes, right? So it's that phenomenon, that paradigm is characterized by one to many. And so the scope for influencing the minds of the many is somewhat limited because the cost of monitoring those few people who disseminate that information is much lesser. While there are few identifiable people, you can go regulate them. So the cost of regulation is lesser. I'm speaking now from an economic point of view. Then we move to the second paradigm with the advent of the internet, which is you had multiple people communicating with multiple people. Everybody was a producer of his or her own truth. And that became seriously problematic. It unleashed the forces of e-commerce, it unleashed the forces of market and so on, and creativity as well, and great poetry and so on. But it created a fundamental problem, and that is, now suddenly instead of the few people, the newspapers which produced the truth, you had millions of people producing their own varieties of truth, and it became practically, from a regulatory point of view, impossible to monitor all their behaviors. There was this wonderful New Yorker cartoon, sir, which showed two dogs talking with each other in front of the screen of an internet, and one telling the other, when you're on the internet, nobody can tell that you're a dog. The foundation of digital communication is based on this principle of anonymity. Anonymity makes digital communication far more efficient than a system where you have to authenticate identities. But this raises a problem from the point of view of regulability. You can't regulate if you don't know who the person it is who has spread that information. And that's a deep challenge of the internet age. And now we move forward to a situation, the third paradigm, which is still many to many, but a few people now are beginning to use this new methodology called artificial intelligence and machine learning, which allows people to segment the population into smaller groups of people. So if, for instance, you have a certain set of preferences, if you like a certain type of toothpaste, or if you like watching certain types of movies, or if you like consuming certain types of media output, it is likely that you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or you belong to a certain political ideology. And based on that individual targeting, you're able to now direct certain messages which can impact that behavior. And one of the great examples of how this was exploited is the example of Cambridge Analytica. Right? Cambridge Analytica became the basis for Trump's victory in United States. So the role of freedom of speech became highly dubious in America. I mean, the very foundation of Donald Trump is free speech. And the moment now Twitter and Facebook and other media companies started withdrawing that freedom, there's a massive backlash from the libertarians to say that how can you impact free speech, right? So it's a double-edged sword. Free speech is a double-edged sword. In the hands of the truthful like Copernicus and Socrates, free speech is wonderful. But in the hands of the Donald Trumps and the people who, for instance, were trying to purvey hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin during the pandemic, it's dangerous. So how do you resolve this debate? I'll leave you with those thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pawan. I usually, there is a suggestion. Generally, when you want to understand yourself or someone else, you allude to an animal, a wild animal or someone. Then you can understand yourself or the other person better. So I usually allude speeches to a sport. So Professor Pawan's presentation here, I think it's like a pole vaulter. He came from Galileo to the current situation. So, and of course he jumped very neatly over the pole. But sometimes it goes above our head because he has gone 6 meters high. But one or two questions I think which came to me when he was speaking. He turned the question from is to can. So I thought, somewhere inherently he was probably looking at, I don't know, but I am just seeing, we are not talking about a transactional relationship on how media is becoming a tool. ట్రాన్సాక్షనల్ అంటే నాకు ఇది నీకు ఇది ఇస్తే నీకు ఇంత పైసలు ఇస్తే టూల్ అవుతుంది అనేది ఆ సిచ్యుయేషన్ ఉంటుంది. దట్స్ దేర్, ద కరప్షన్ అండ్ దట్స్ ఇన్హరెంట్లీ దేర్. బట్ ఐ థింక్ దేర్ ఆర్ సమ్ issues beyond. So democratic values which are supposed to be held or promoted by media, I think that is not happening because media itself started believing in other than democratic values. I think that's how it became a tool, I feel, some places. So anyway, I'm going into my presentation, sorry. So now I invite Dr. Kota Neelima to present her perspective.
Good morning. Thank you to the foundation for inviting me to talk on such an important issue on such an important day. My tributes to Sri Jaipal Reddy Garu and my respects to Lakshmi Garu and also the eminent people on the panel here. All of them an inspiration. It's an honor to be here. Several years ago, I had an opportunity to meet Jaipal Garu. I had taken a break from academics. I left JNU and I said I want to know the real realities of India. Not from the libraries, not from research, but in real terms. I wanted to know the texture of India. And therefore I became a journalist to actually write about the unseen distress of people and to be a catalyst, I hoped, of transformative change. I said there will be change if you write about these issues, if you write about issues which nobody wants to know, like the farmers or the women labor. These issues which will never be written in newspapers or shown on television. People warned me then also कि भाई जर्नलिज्म కాదమ్మా, ये रास्ता जर्नलिज्म से नहीं होगा. They told me ఈ రాస్తాతో పోతే మీకు ట్రాన్స్ఫర్మేటివ్ చేంజ్ రాదమ్మా, మీరు తప్పు చేస్తున్నారు, టైం వేస్ట్ అవుతుంది మీది, మీరు అకాడమిక్స్లోనే కంటిన్యూ చేయండి, ఇక్కడ ఏమైనా అవుతుందేమో, అక్కడ ఏమో కాదు, జర్నలిజం ఇస్ నాట్ ద వే. బట్ అఫ్ కోర్స్ మన పాత అలవాటు ఏంటంటే సంబడి సేస్ డోంట్ డూ ఇట్, you want to do it. You want to really find out why are they saying. Maybe we can change their mind. And I also believe that journalism is not good or bad. It is journalists who are good or bad. So that's what I believe. So that's where the journey began. And in the middle of the journey, maybe, perhaps in the beginning itself, while covering national politics, I met Jayapal Garu. He was the principal voice of the main opposition party at that time. This was between 2002 and 2004. And I was fascinated by the way he would position an issue, analyze an issue. He brought purpose to everyday politics. There was historicity. There was context which was universal. There was end to end, from where knowledge began, perhaps, where consciousness began, end to end understanding of an issue or a topic or a problem. So for that brief period of time, when we were having those discussions, I felt that perhaps that transformative change I was looking at was possible. అప్పుడు నాకు అనిపించింది ఇది అవ్వచ్చు, నేను ట్రై చేస్తుంది possibly అవ్వచ్చు. But that was for a brief period of time. I want to just highlight that point. Now this was also the time which was important because here was an opposition party which was trying to highlight the misgovernance of the ruling party at that time through solutions, rights-based approach, concepts like Bharat Nirman. That's what the opposition party was trying to do. And who was helping bring out these inadequacies in the governance? The media. It was not because media was siding with this or that. Media was doing its job of trying to say that, okay, this is a problem not being handled correctly. Let us find a solution. These are some of the solutions. You may agree, you may disagree, but at least the media was talking about these things. That's why there was a space created for the democratic change which happened. Because voters had a choice to choose between this option, this model, that model. That's what the media did. It presented both sides, or all sides, let us put it this way. So, now this is what was also very critical from that time when Jayapal Garu was so active on the national stage, very critical role which he played during that time. The media, I don't think what the media did then and what media does now, there is a difference. And let's look at what is the difference and what can be, let's examine that. Now, as the topic today says, that has it become a tool? There is one version, of course, which says that yes, it has become a tool which can be used by anyone, not just those in power, those with money, those who can influence. And there is another side. There are a set of arguments. I'm going to balance, Dilip Garu, what you said, and what Professor Saab also said, that let's balance both sides of the story and see where is the truth. Let's examine where is the truth. Okay. So on one side there is this thing that media has become entirely submissive. Okay. What are the arguments which you get from inside the media industry on why is media behaving this way? And let me share some of those things. Ante media వాళ్ళ గురించి వాళ్ళ కండక్ట్ గురించి ఏమంటారు? When we say that why don't you report the truth, అప్పుడు వాళ్ళు ఏమంటారు? And please correct me if I'm missing any points. First reason is that media too has families. మాకు కూడా కుటుంబాలు ఉంటాయి, మాకు కూడా పనులు ఉంటాయి, మాకు కూడా రెస్పాన్సిబిలిటీస్ ఉంటాయి. How are we going to pay the checks? We need the paychecks. And that's why we do what we are asked to do. Now, humbly, there have been families before. There were bills being paid before also. At a time when media used to stand up against the government, వాళ్ళు అప్పుడు families ని పోషించే వాళ్ళు, వాళ్ళకు కూడా they had families. I come from one such family. The second reason is that media today is under tremendous pressure from political parties and businesses who push them to follow a particular agenda or a particular argument. Correct. But it modatisari avutle. This is not the first time it's happening. It used to happen before as well. In fact, media can never operate in a void. Media vacuum lo pan cheyaledu. If it does, it becomes irrelevant kada. So it has to be in the middle of this pressure. Only media has to operate and succeed in telling the truth. Third, the audience has changed. News has become entertainment. Well, sorry to disappoint, but news has always been entertainment. Always. From the point where the headline is framed to the point where the text is structured, every word is chosen to engage the audience, sell the product. ఒక న్యూస్ పేపర్, టీవీ ఛానల్, మ్యాగజైన్ అమ్ముడు పడకపోతే దాని న్యూస్ ఎవరు చదువుతారు? సో ఎవ్రీథింగ్ ఈస్ డిజైన్ టు అట్రాక్ట్ అండ్ reach out to you so that you can read what is being said. So, yes, it has always been a product and yes, it has always been entertainment. So, nothing new there also. Fourth reason ఏమంటారంటే money has become central. అందుకనే, now we are not able to do what we want to do. But money has always been central to news. News has always been a business and a very good business. I mean, why would anybody invest in a news organization, a channel, or a magazine under the present structures? Why would they invest if they do not make profits? How will they pay the paychecks? How will they pay the employees to work? So what has changed? If these things remain the reasons which the arguments which journalists give, and we see that there is no difference between, let's say, these problems existed before also. But how come those people, those times saw a courageous journalism, and today we see what we see? A submissive, a surrendered kind of media. There are some things which are special to news. And one of it is self-regulation. That is what is special to news, and that is what used to happen before. Journalism mundara self-regulate చేసుకునేవాళ్ళు. They made their own rules. And few rules I'll talk about, there are more, but just want to point out some things ఇప్పుడు ఈ కాలంలో లేవు. First rule, there's always bias. News always has bias. So because ఎందుకు bias ఉంది? Why is there bias? When you look at news, మీరు ఏ న్యూస్ చూసినా కూడా దానికి ఒక చూడటానికి పాయింట్ ఆఫ్ వ్యూ ఉంటుంది. So it is the observation of it always will have bias. Now it depends on how much is being included in your news story, and మీరు choose చేస్తున్నారు. As a journalist, you are choosing what is being written and what is not being written. Which point of view are you presenting? That you are choosing, right? That depends on the journalist and the news organization where it is being presented. So bias is inherent in news, in journalism. Therefore, we have a concept of balanced news. You have bias. It is inevitable. How do you deal with it? You include as many points of view as possible so that the audience, the reader, has the option, the choice of either choosing one or two of them, or at least getting to know that there is not just one point of view, there are 5 points of view. So that మీరు ఆ biasని counter చేస్తున్నారు. That's how you balance. That's the job of journalism, that you balance that bias. Now, most important thing దాంట్లో ఏమైంది? That when you express the bias, or when you said that there were so many different point of view, what happened then was the bias of the journalist got neutralized. The bias of the organization got neutralized. And that is why eventually we arrived at truth, because there was exploration possible. మీరు ఎక్స్ప్లోర్ చేయగలరు, ఒక ప్రాబ్లంకి సొల్యూషన్ ఏమిటి అనేది ఎక్స్ప్లోర్ చేయగలరు. That exploration was possible because these various points of view, diverse points of view were expressed. Now the third and the most important rule was a journalist was feared by those in power. In fact, to the extent that they were hated by those in power. And that was a medal of honor. Because If a journalist was preferred a favorite of a government or those in power, that was seen as a drawback. That was seen as a negative factor about the journalist. This is a very important characteristic. Because why is that? Because a journalist must show the mirror to the government on where it is failing. The journalist had to have the strength to face the ire of the government, because there will be a pushback in case you tell powerful people that what they are doing, expose what they are doing. There will be a pushback. The journalist had to have the strength, organizations had to have the strength to stand against that level of pushback from the government. The ministers, those who were holding important positions, had to be worried about journalists. That was the definition, that was the characteristic of a journalist. And that happened only because of one major reason, that the journalist had to be herself or himself above temptation. To an extent that they had to be respected by even the governments whom they criticized. That's rule number 3, or at least self-regulation rule number 3. Now, but today's journalism is an arena without these self-regulation rules, or in fact any other rules. News on primetime TV especially avoids issues like price rise and employment. And why do I say TV? Is because one half-an-hour slot, as we all know, is seen by thousands. In a week, one anchor show is seen by lakhs of people. So it's very critical to understand what TV debates do, what kind of help they do, if they do any, and what kind of damage they do, which they do. Issues that create negative image of the government are neutralized. And I'm not telling something which all of us here don't know. Whichever side of the debate you are on, you know this is what happens. Negative image is minimized. Opposition protests or any protest against the government are discredited. Attacks on institutions, which we are seeing rampantly, are trivialized. So it's not just post-truth, it is now post-fact. Why? Because governments don't inform journalists, and journalists don't ask questions from the government. So between the government and the media, there is full cooperation. There is full coordination. And there is also full collusion and sometimes even surrender. Now, we have to talk about the digital media because it's been referred by earlier speakers as well. It's very important, and I'm actually happy to some extent. I like the anonymity of digital media. How else do you tell truth in this country? And as a woman, I know how difficult it is to tell the truth. I'm an author, and I do research on gender and women, and still I'm not able to 100% tell the truth or the issues, fully explore the issues of women in this country. So I know what it means to be unable to tell the truth. And therefore, I like the anonymity of the digital space to be able to tell the truth. Regulation, yes. But regulation in the hands of government, no. Any regulation has to be self-regulation when it comes to either digital or the print or the electronic media. So, let me just briefly talk about my research and then I'll end. I head an institute in Delhi. It's called Institute of Perception Studies. What we do is research rural and urban distress and role of media in democracies. This is, if you remember, that was the beginning of my journey also. That's where I started, hoping to write about distress, hoping to write about stories which nobody will care. And today I research about that and try to find out how and why, how basically we can put the focus back on these issues and how to do it. Very important. So as part of that, we have a media research wing to it. It is called Rate the Debate. We study things which even the Supreme Court says we don't have the structure, and we humbly have submitted our research to them. Bias, hate speech, derogatory language, any level of unbalanced news reportage, all this we study in this institute. So broadly, there are 4 general pathways of creating perception in media according to our research for the last 4 years. Number 1 is subjective focus. Ante ఒకటే చోట, even if you have so much of data and topics, అయినా కూడా you selectively choose certain issues to highlight on media only. మీకు తెలుసు, the media knows, the organizations know, and the audience and the readers know there are 15 other issues of equal importance and sometimes even more important than the issue which is being highlighted. And that is number 1, which is subjective focus. Pathway number 1 to make perception at an industrial scale. Ante image building at an industrial scale. That's how it is made. Subjective focus. Number 2, risk amplification. TV anchors repeatedly use certain words and connotations to amplify risk and to justify negative perception. I have some examples. I'll just explain how risk amplification, and risk ni exploring it, making it multiple. Pattern creation. Events are shown not as isolated happenings but as deliberate pattern. Pattern creations can also happen in some very which can lead to dangerous outcomes. Negative forecast. This is the 4th and the last pathway, which is based on assumptions, anchors envisage a negative future. Ante ippudu unna paristhitini batti prediction. How do you make a prediction? Most of these cases lo negative prediction. Negative prediction has a response from the audience. The audience feel insecure, and that's the insecurity which is generated through negative prediction. Now let me give you some examples of this methodology in action. So number 1 is language analysis. First method is language analysis. For instance, you recall the farmers' protest on the borders of Delhi over 1 year. They were sitting on the roads, moved farm laws, so they wanted these 3 farm laws to be repealed. So at the time when the farmers' protest was happening, even I went there, and I could see they were sitting in extremely difficult conditions on bare roads, open roads మీద. చాలా కష్టంగా అక్కడ వాళ్ళు they were fighting one of the most historic battles India has ever seen. And of course they won. But how did the media present them? That's what we were also watching. How did the media present the farmers' protest, which was happening just a few kilometers away from their studios in Delhi? So they did go there. I mean, I'm not saying that they were just sitting in the studios. Obviously they went to the spot, they'd seen the farmers, they interacted with the farmers. And how did they report? According to our language analysis of anchors from several Hindi and English channels, national channels, the most used words to represent the farmers were Khalistani, toolkit, urban Naxal, Badnaam, Deshdroh, Rashtravad, Andolan Jeevi. These are some of the words. There are more, but what I'm trying to say is these words were not used once. That's why I read the 4 pathways of making perception. ఎలా తయారు చేశారు perception వాళ్ళ గురించి ఒక్కసారి అనలేదు ఇది. They were not just mentioned once in passing. They were mentioned repeatedly till you made up your mind, so that when now I ask you what were they called, you said Khalistani. Because you remembered. This is the power of media. On one day, February 5th, 2021, on a particular channel, the word Khalistan and Khalistani were used 37 times. And this is a 25-minute program. That is the intensity with which media creates perception. Second method is of our institute is called prime time tracker. Equally important, what we do is we all understand what is prime time. Prime time is a time during a particular channel's entire day when the channel believes that the maximum number of people are watching their shows. So that goes into hundreds, thousands, and as I said, if you put the cumulative numbers in a particular week, it can go up to lakhs of people watching that particular segment of news, debates on TV. Now, in 2021 September, I must say before that this is a very difficult task of watching and measuring prime time. లక్షల సెకండ్స్ మేము దాన్ని చూసి దాన్ని రీసెర్చ్ చేయాలి. సో our team researched 6 lakh seconds in August September 2021, and what did we find? What we wanted to look was that what was the issues on which people were being diverted, ఎలా డైవర్ట్ చేస్తున్నారు attention. We wanted to really research that. 18% of topics opposition ni criticizing the opposition for what they were doing. This was what mainly was happening. Anyway, the third method we have, by the way, all this research is available to all of you on our website. It's a simple website, Institute of Perception Studies, ipsdelhi.org. So anybody can see, it's free access, people can see. So I have just 5 to 8 minutes, I'm going to just rush through the rest of the findings and end. Third method we research is speaking time. We just talked about bias. We just talked about balance. So if there are 5 different points of view on a particular issue, it could be any issue, దాని గురించి 5 points of view ఉంటాయి. You call 5 speakers to the studio, each one representing each point of view. And you have all of them sitting in the studio and the anchor begins their talk. But what if the anchor doesn't invite 3 of them and invites just 2 of them to talk? Or the anchor invites everybody to talk but doesn't let 3 of them talk, and and only some panelists are allowed to talk. So we decided to research speaking time. Yavariki enta time vastundi. Thank you. Time was each panelist being given. So we discovered that the techniques in which a panelist is controlled, an anchor uses interruptions. అంటే మీరు మీ పాయింట్ ఆఫ్ వ్యూ చెప్తుంటే మధ్యలో ఆపేయటం, డిస్టర్బ్ చేయటం, interrupting the flow of.
You have used the right words, polarization and collusion. Thank you, sir.
Any more questions? We have only we have only two minutes. I'll just take 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll stop.
Is it reaching the people?
I'm just remembering a former election commissioner T.N. Session once said while addressing a gathering in Trivandrum that he said press is a shame to society. They are third class people asking fourth class questions, reporting fifth class shit. Now referring to Dr. Neelima who said there is no problem with journalism as such, but there is a problem with the journalists. Yes, she is very, very true. It's not the system that is bad and all the systems are good. The people who are in the system and the people who run the system is a problem. Just because of these few individuals in those systems, the entire journalism profession, fraternity has been getting very, very wrong image. Imagine a day...
Can you be short?
Yeah. I'm asking this question. Imagine a day without a media. When newspapers were not coming during the corona times and social media had a jolly ride. My question to her is, ma'am, you are very true, but do you have any suggestions how to improvise or how to empower journalists?
Okay. Thank you. You got the, can you repeat please?
No, about your research analysis, the space occupied by so much so time, other thing, is it a big reach to people or it is confined to your analysis to your institution?
Can you,
That was,
can you be short?
I'll be short. I'll be short. First question, how do we empower journalists? I remember, and my tribute to a lot of journalists who died during COVID. వాళ్ళు ఎందుకు మరణించారంటే they were on the field అండి, and that was the difference between some kind of journalists and other. వాళ్ళు అక్రెడిషన్ లేదు కొంతమందికి, వాళ్ళు రూరల్ ఏరియాస్లో రిపోర్ట్ చేసేవాళ్ళు. దే వర్ రిపోర్టింగ్ ఫ్రమ్ రూరల్ ఏరియాస్, మెనీ ఆఫ్ దెమ్ డిడ్ నాట్ హ్యావ్ అక్రెడిషన్. దే వర్ రిపోర్టింగ్ అబౌట్ కోవిడ్, దే డైడ్. వీ కెప్ట్ ఏ record of that. About 1,000 people died. According to our research, 1,000 people in India died covering COVID. Journalists. Many of them got relief. A lot of them did not get relief because the government gives accredited journalist support. Na submission ఏంటంటే, don't wait for government accreditation. Government accrediting a journalist means recognizing a journalist. They recognize who they want to, they don't want to recognize others. There has to be a social responsibility towards journalists. There has to be a civic responsibility to journalists. Meer journalist, if you appreciate a journalist for doing a brave, courageous story, investigating powerful people, they will feel strong. It's not always about money. It's about support. When they take responsibility and fight, let's stand by them. That's the best way to empower. Now I hope I answered your question. The second question on the spread. Yes, I think a lot of media houses have adopted our methodology. To give you some examples, like Barkadat, for instance, has constantly referred to our research while talking about, what the media has been, how it has been covering, etc. Especially whenever there is a judicial issue in Supreme Court, or an issue which is raised, like for instance what Ramana Garu has just said, our research comes into play. So yes, it has been widely referred, but it depends on the people to reach out to these tools. Idi mem tayar chesindi, it's not for any profit. It is available, it is a public available information. So people have to come and see and use it and understand what are they consuming when you watch news. What are you consuming? Adi meer chudaniki you have to make the initiative.
Thank you, Neelima garu.
Thank you.
I think okay, the debate can continue, debate should continue. Inka chala vishayalu ravalsi undi. I think all the speakers have brought different perspectives and different dimensions of the problem. దీన్ని ఇంకా కంటిన్యూ చేద్దాం. రైట్ నౌ ఐ థింక్ we should have done this at the beginning. So I request presentation of floral bouquets and mementos to all the panelists by Mrs. Bharati and Mrs. Leela. Okay, I think the slight change is each of the family members, they will present a bouquet to each of the panelists. Moment. So Aruna garu, మీరు, so you can choose your panelists. I am not naming. I invite Arvind Garne, vote of thanks.
On behalf of the family members of late CSG, immensely thankful to Professor Reddy Garu, always forthcoming in helping and organizing these events, and we are thankful to all the distinguished speakers on the dais for taking out their valuable time in delivering and giving their valuable ideas about the present context challenges of media. Once again, thank you so much for all the people who have come here, to especially who made it possible to attend the program, and also people who are watching this program live on YouTube channel. Thank you so much for everybody. Please join us for refreshments. Thank you.
I didn't realize, I'm so sorry.